most of the things that we actually found out later is that when you have operationally minded people inside of the R&D,
Yes.
things get better. And so when we created, I remember you created the SRE team, right?
Right.
I remember quite well. We had a mission, right? And we started to see our purpose. We need to improve the reliability
hmm
and make sure that, humans, we increase their happiness.
Welcome to the Reliability Rebels podcast, where we improve production by challenging the status quo. Your host, Amin Astaneh from Cherto Modo.
Reliability Rebels. Reliability Rebels. Reliability Rebels.
Welcome to the Reliability Rebels podcast, where we explore how to make software and systems more reliable by challenging the status quo. I'm your host, Amin Astaneh. Today, we got something special. I'm introducing a real visionary in the DevOps and SRE space. I know that's big talk, but let me prove it to you. So all the way back in 2018, our guest here, he wrote a chapter of the book Seeking SRE, discussing how to use machine learning to predict things like high traffic events to inform capacity planning. 2018. He also was doing platform engineering before there was even a term called platform engineering. He was standardizing how multiple engineering teams operate their services at a tech unicorn. And then finally, he just submitted his doctoral thesis called Achieving Successful DevOps Adoption in IT Organizations, meaning in a few short months, I'm going to start calling him Dr. DevOps. He and I go way back. I am pleased to introduce you to Ricardo Amaro. Very, very glad to have you join us.
Yeah, all my pleasure to be here with you. I mean, like you said, we go way back. Really happy to share my all of my thoughts with you and to your audience.
No doubts. So let's get right into it. Talk to us a little bit more about yourself. I know I gave you a fantastic intro. There's more that you could talk about. Who's Ricardo?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. After what you just said, I'm speechless. But anyway, so my name is Ricardo Amaro, as you said. I'm passionate about DevOps and Linux and free and open source software. And also, I've contributed to several projects out there, Kubernetes and OpenTelemetry. I am the founder of the Portuguese Drupal Association, so I'm very dedicated to Drupal. And I work as a senior engineering manager at Acquia, where we run a large-scale multi-tenant Kubernetes deployment across 53 clusters and around 50,000 production sites. Aside from that, I have published, as you said, some work and an SRE chapter book. Also recently in a few journals about DevOps. And yeah, recently I finished my PhD thesis, which is called Achieving Successful DevOps Adoption in IT Organizations. Yeah, one of the things that connects to that, if we want to start
Sure.
with that,
Let's do it.
I like to be like that. I like to look at things or try to research things before they actually become a topic, right? One thing that happened similar to that was that in 2013, when nobody else was actually talking about Docker, I made a presentation at DrupalCon about Drupal being built and tested in Docker.
That's right, you did.
That actually spawned a series of changes inside of the Drupal.org testing system, where I think it was 1 year later, we were talking about, okay, let's revamp all of the system, all of the Drupal CI system. And that was really a project that I'm really proud that we did that back then, because it reduced a lot of time for testing and reduced a lot of cost. Testing things in containers was really a game changer, I would say. And containers are a game changer, are still a game changer. The cloud native is one of the biggest, I think it's one of the biggest endeavor that community open source in the humanity is taking right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it's around that I'm passionate about because you asked me to talk a bit about myself, and this is what's in my mind currently and in the past.
Yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing. And yeah, you're a visionary, man. You're right. Like you were talking about Docker before it was cool, and you've always been like trailblazing in terms of the technology and the process out there. So it's really cool to see you continue to grow, and now you're getting a doctorate. But let's go all the way back in the past. Maybe talk about the beginning. Like, how'd you get into tech in the first place, man?
Well, that's a long story, but I'll keep it short. I've always been fascinated by computers. The first time I did some coding, I think I was like 12. I had my first computer, which was a ZX Spectrum, like with 40K memory,
Yeah, yeah,
as a Z80 processor, right? That today I think you're using elevators or not even that anymore.
right. Yeah.
And I did some coding in BASIC back then, but what BASIC was not the thing that actually fascinated me. I
Oh,
realized later because my mother would give me money to go and like have lunch,
yeah.
but I would go and buy books.
Wow. 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 That's usually
And
like the other way around. Like you go pick up candy instead of like picking up like
yes,
with your lunch money or whatever. You're picking up books.
yeah, because I didn't have the money to buy a computer.
Yeah.
So I basically shifted the money to go and buy some books that would, kick my brain to think about the wonderful things I could code in those in the computer, right? And it
Yeah.
was a little bit later that actually I convinced my father after walking several kilometers searching for a place. There was a place in Lisbon where they said they were selling this computer that I had. I just talk about it as an X
Yeah.
Spectrum on a lower price,
Yeah. On
and we
sale.
couldn't find it. We couldn't find it, so he gave up. He said, "Okay, let's buy you the real thing." And
That's
I won
awesome.
that. I remember quite clearly what happened that day. Segueing back, forwards a few years later, in high school, I was fortunate to be invited to work in the school newspaper,
Yeah.
where I got the opportunity to use some really, really cool IBM expensive equipment.
Mm,
And dude, I spent hours in those machines.
I'm not
Uh,
surprised. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was like they had like these scanner and print, laser print. It was like the edge thing.
Yeah. Top of the line.
Um,
Absolutely.
Top of the line. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
I think they actually won a prize, and that's why they got that equipment from
oh, I
IBM
see.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I actually expanded my horizons and went to do something entirely different.
Mm.
I went to acting, right? So,
That's right. Yes. That's right. You
and
were in acting.
yeah, and then I finished a degree. It was my first degree. It was in performing arts. It was not in tech, right? Despite my passion about tech, I was also passionate about um, how human beings interact and how you can perform and how you can educate through performance. That was one of the biggest things, right? I did some TV, some theater, soap operas, but I realized after a few years that I really wanted, what I really, really wanted was to explore this really new thing that appeared, the kid on the block. It's called Linux.
Right?
Um, yeah. Uh,
Yeah. Hmm.
and I started with Slackware. It was my first distro, right? So yeah, so I went to computer science later on, and
Yeah.
meanwhile, I worked in the private sector in Portugal, and eventually I got into Drupal and Acquia,
Yep.
where where I met you, right?
That's right.
You
That's where we
actually
met.
you actually interviewed me, right? And
That's
we
right. I
shared
did.
some really cool tools during that interview. I remember it was like ATOP, right? Probably we talked about S-Trace or something like
Oh,
that.
we definitely talked about S-Trace in that interview. I definitely remember that interview fondly.
That interview, I remember. I think it was one of those singular moments in a life where I actually felt someone was talking my language,
Yeah.
and I felt like home. Dude, I really felt like home talking to
Wow.
you. And after that, you know the story, right?
Huge stories. I mean, so
Yeah.
you stayed since you've been there, through the company's whole history. I was there for 9 years. Let's talk a bit about that history, right? Let's talk about your first week, actually. So yeah, we did the interview. You flew from Lisbon to Burlington, Massachusetts, and you got your laptop. What happened? Tell me about this week,
Oh yeah, the first
right?
week.
Yeah.
Oh, it was I think Amazon had a problem back then, like
Hmm.
we were starting to use Amazon, and it was like,
Yeah.
what is this system that we have created here in this company? And yeah, this is beautiful, like all of the clusters, and it was. I was really impressed with all of the work that you guys were doing in Acquia. That's why, so it was marvelous to me,
Yeah.
because you had load balancing, you had failover, all of those things which were really very nice to have. But then you were on top of AWS,
We were.
which was just ramping up at that
Yes.
time, right?
It was immature back then. Yeah, for sure.
And you what happened in my first or second week, I can't remember well. It
Yeah.
was that they sent you an email. I remember you were just sitting right beside me, standing up, or not sitting. You were standing up. I was sitting, and you were like, "Oh, they are going to do a kernel patch on every host." And
That's right. That's right. I now remember because we're talking about this and we're reminiscing. I now remember what happened. So back in those days, like the AWS console existed. You had EC2. We were running on EC2 instances, and what they did is they released a new API like feature, which was the instant status. So they
for
they
that.
they they introduced instant status, and then they immediately marked all of the instances as, hey, we need to turn them off.
Exactly, impaired, right?
Yeah, and they just like marked all of them to be terminated at around the
Oh my
same
God.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was like your first or second week.
Yeah. 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 So basically, uh, I think it was you or someone else that said, okay, now the only thing you need to know right now is how to reboot, how to relaunch, not to
Yeah.
reboot, how to relaunch those servers. And that's, like, uh, that's the first command I learned, was to relaunch the server. And very quickly that escalated, and we started seeing, okay, this it doesn't work if we're doing this one by one. And then we started
Nice.
using, I think it was Screen, or maybe several consoles at the same time. It was something like that. But
We were
you know,
using a new screen. Yeah, so we had
or
multiple.
that, yeah.
We must have because that was in the pre-Bastion days. So there was a point where we actually had a Bastion host that we were
Yep.
jumping onto and then running our commands. But and at that time, we just had our laptops.
Yep. Yep.
So I think it was just multiple windows. We might have just been doing multiple windows. You know, it was real Wild West cowboy stuff.
Yeah, but that's what you get. All that's all the excitement that you get when you go to a startup like that. It
Yeah.
was really really exciting. I mean, it was like you say, it was a little bit Wild West, but it was pumping, right? It was making you feel like you were just making things run and running at scale, and keeping them reliable, right? Yeah, I think that was when I started. Well, I started to get concerned about running reliable production systems way back.
Oh
Like it
yeah.
was like I think it was in 2003. We had I was working in a company connected to the Lisbon City Hall, and
Hmm.
we had a mail system.
Oh.
It was based on Linux, and that thing, because of a network was failing, right? We
Uh-huh.
didn't have a reliable network
Yeah.
provider. I started, trying to see, okay, can I have another mail system if this mail system is not
Yeah.
responding, so that
Sure.
they can still, and that's where I started, my concern about reliability, right? And one of the things that I implemented back then in 2003 in the city hall is that we had these historical buildings. By the way, you have to come to Lisbon, and then I'll
Oh,
show you historical
100%.
buildings.
Agreed.
And I created networks, connections from building to building, and there was even a point where, because the buildings were so spread out, that we were thinking about using omnidirectional antennas, like so that they
Oh.
could connect to each other. But yeah, that came very expensive, so we really didn't go that way. But yeah, the first time, I remember also we installed, these Wi-Fi boards. Nobody else was using them, and they were like, "What is this? Where's the network cable?" No, no, you use this this
Right.
this board with an antenna. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They were quite happy because it worked. Anyway, so I would say it was before I joined you in Acquia,
Yeah.
and it was precisely there that I started finding reliability a problem, a fascinating problem to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing story. I mean, I also had to start an email. Like my first job was running email infrastructure in a garage in Florida. So it's interesting that we have these parallel tracks. It's so wild. Yeah, that was definitely the start. It was Wild West. It was cowboy. But over the years, you and I started to get interested in the Phoenix project and DevOps and start to explore how to make systems and culture better. Because week two of you joining Acquia, we were already dealing with concerns of scale. Okay, we need to relaunch 600 EC2 instances. We were already dealing with those problems at that moment. So, Dr. DevOps, or soon to be Dr. DevOps, can you tell us in your words, let's start from the beginning there. What is DevOps again? Can you give us a refresh? Like, what's your view on this subject?
So obviously, DevOps, it has a series of definitions, but the commonly, DevOps combines development, obviously, dev and operations,
Hmm.
to improve software delivery and support. And it actually addresses challenges such as customer demands, competitions, external threats, and sometimes even legislation. So you need to respond fast to those to those things, right? And one of the things that I truly believe we've been seeing from DevOps is that it's mutable, right? It's been changing, right? Initially, you have, like there is a definition that it is an organizational approach that stresses empathy and
Yes.
cross-functional collaboration, right? And then, the whole thing in order to operate resilient systems and accelerate delivery of changes. But now we see that it's become a little bit more, right? Because of why, if we look at the why DevOps appeared,
Hmm.
it's going to be mind-blowing to some people, right? Because we don't realize this, but to give you some more context,
Hmm.
not very far away and not very long ago, the best practice that we had in terms of software delivery lifecycle was the waterfall model, right?
Right. That's right.
And in this model, a delivery of a software could take months, years, so that the operations team or the customer could actually see a version of it, right?
Right.
And here you can see how it would start. Like you have the requirements and the design, the implementation, the verification, the maintenance. Um, Before you actually pass on this to operations, right? And
Right.
operations would provision and install and upgrade and maintain, right?
Hmm.
And scale, right?
Yep.
All of this software. Now the problem that we have is that we moved, and it's fine because that was a great thing. We moved to a new thing, to a beautiful thing called Agile.
Right.
Now,
Agile.
Agile, no, Agile was good, right? But it was more of a thing that accelerated development. It
Correct.
accelerated improving this iteration of customer software and delivery, right?
Correct.
But it was good for development teams, but not so good for operations. They
Right.
had There was still the same disconnect
Hmm.
that you had in waterfall, right? And the problem was that now, instead of you as an operations person having this months or year where you still have time to try to fix even hanging by strings, right, the whole deployment, and it still worked, right? Now you started having the software new versions every week or every month or constantly, right?
Yes.
So these complete this churn completely started burning out teams, the operations teams, right? Because they didn't have enough time to accommodate the changes and the issues they were seeing, right? And
Hmm.
so DevOps, in my investigation, what I see from that, DevOps is a reaction to Agile, right? Some people, oh, it's an extension of Agile. It's like it's because of Agile. It is because of Agile, but
Yes.
it's not really because the right reasons. It's because you had this disconnect, and somehow you had to fix this disconnect, right? And so it's a culture of human collaboration with attention to that reliability and quality problem.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I never thought about it in that fashion. Ops didn't know how to at that point did not, have the means to respond to that feedback cycle. Yeah, they're still using the old paradigms, the old tools. So of course that makes sense. DevOps is a response or a reaction to Agile. That's an interesting perspective. So let's talk about that in concrete, real world terms, right?
Mhm.
So let's go back in time. You and I were at Acquia. We were, newly minted operations folks. And there was an engineering team that worked, with us that was developing, the flagship product. They were doing 2 week sprints and they were shipping a new version every 2 weeks. And we, this was before like CI/CD was really a thing for us. We had manual procedures on how to, it was tool assisted. Like we were able to stand up and tear down and reboot and patch, but at the scale even back then, it was starting to take up a lot of our time. So let's talk about a story of where our DevOps journey started, like the problems you were dealing with. So the second time you visited the Boston, you came into town. Tell us a little bit about,
Oh, yeah,
right, what happened there.
The second time I visit the Boston office, I actually stayed with a colleague of us. I think it was Chris Porter,
Yeah, Chris Porter.
and I think he was in sales, right? And I think it
Pre-sales,
was
something
no
like that. He was
pre-sales,
sales
something like
oriented,
that.
something like that.
It was fun, like incredible guy.
Oh, he's great.
I have good memories. But he was like, and I was on call. I remember quite clearly. And I was sitting in his living room, and he was watching TV, and I had this screen with Naxtamon with a bunch of red things, a list of red things there. And I remember
Let me jump
quite
in real fast. Let me jump in real
exa
fast. Okay, we should probably explain what Nextamon is. So in the ancient days, before we had Grafana, before we had PagerDuty, before we had any of this stuff, we were running Nagios. So Nagios,
Mhm.
it's still around, but it is a monitoring system, and it will, do network connections and test things, or will talk to an agent and test things, and then it's pass or fail, basically. So there was this client tool to Nagios called
Yeah.
Naxtamon, where you were able to, it was a desktop application. You were able to configure multiple instances in Nagios, and then it would pull in the status of all of the infrastructure, whether or not it was up or down, or there are services up or down, and it would display it in a heads up display. And there would be, like down or critical or warning, and each of them had their own colors, but it was that's what we had for our dashboarding at this point. All right,
It was
Ricardo,
not really
continue.
bad. I mean, you could right click and have like mute this,
I mean,
acknowledge.
yes, it was useful. It was useful for the time. I think my perspective has been biased by all of the new observability, monitoring, incident management, but in the ancient days we didn't have
Yeah,
any of that. It was like when we started, we had to go to the Nagios instances webpage and refresh it. And then if you had multiple Nagios instances, we had to have tabs up for each of them and go between them and click refresh and see that. So Naxtamon solved the
yeah,
problem
yeah, yeah,
of representing all of our alerts in a single pane of glass. That was a
yeah.
problem
And then-
that it
and
solved.
and that in that moment was so I was on call, as I was saying, and he
Yeah.
looked at the screen with Naxtamon, and he goes like, "How can you work like that?" Like I felt like he was so shocked,
Mhm.
right? And that's the thing, right? That was operation. So I slowly started to understand, right? It's not about tools. It's about this collaboration that you need to have between both sides of this world, right? I still think up to this day that when we started, the R&D was together, right? So operations and development, they were exactly in the same room. They were under the same person. And
Yes, they
I
were.
still feel up to this moment that, somehow we could have done that in a way that this collaboration could have been continued over time, right? Instead of, creating a new operations team out of dev, because most of the things that we actually found out later is that when you have operationally minded people inside of the R&D,
Yes.
things get better,
They
right?
do.
When you don't have, things won't get better. And so when we created, I remember you created the SRE team, right?
Right.
I remember quite well. We had a mission, right? And we started to see um, our purpose in Acquia, right?
Yeah.
And our purpose in Acquia was like we need to uh, improve the reliability
Hmm.
and make sure that humans are treated with we increase their happiness, we increase their work-life balance, and not
Right.
not in the sense of only the development is being looked at, but also the part of releasing and monitoring
Hmm.
and ensuring things are working perfectly in production and alerting and scaling, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that when I saw that lately we were moving to Kubernetes, right?
Right.
That was like, oh, it's now or never. Now we're going to do it, right?
Yes.
And I think Kubernetes, uh, it's also based on containers and all that,
Sure.
um, enables you to go and improve all of these systems in a way that you create that platform engineering back, that horizon that you now can build things and improve them at scale, right? Because
Yes.
if you keep using the same instances, we still have fields, but most of the fields was the main system that we had back then, right? Just to describe
Right.
what it
The
was,
old tool set for the
the
flagship
platform,
product.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we still have people using it, right? But
Hmm.
it's like it's a very, very, very small percentage now. And what I see is that with the development of the CI/CD pipeline, with the development of security tools that are shift left,
Right.
code coverage, automation, and all of that, things actually improved in every sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that actually improved, and
Hmm.
there are numbers to measure that, was that uh, when we created a service catalog,
Yeah.
um, I drove an initiative which reduced by 88% the amount of repos that had an unknown owner. And so
Wow.
you ended up with all of that, you know, obviously, because we had a ton of hackathons in the past. We were a startup, so
Yeah.
people were
We were
coding
creating
like
repos
crazy,
everywhere. Oh
right?
yeah.
We had a ton of repos,
Yep.
and the ownership is really a problem when you want to make sure you're optimizing and improving things at scale, right?
Yes.
And
That's
and
right.
really and really taking ownership to a new level where you say, okay, you own this,
Mm-hmm.
so you will own one thing that you and I created back then,
Hmm.
which was the operational responsibility assessment, right?
Yeah.
That later on, you remember that? Uh,
Oh, I know. Yeah, I definitely know the ORA, man. Yeah.
and later on, you created the launch readiness criteria, right?
Yep. Yep. A pre-production checklist of sorts for engineering teams to validate against before they went to production. So the way that it worked for the audience's benefit is that Ricardo and I and other folks that were in the site reliability engineering org, we collected a bunch of learnings, pain points we would encounter when running production systems, and we created a checklist across how do you accept work from other teams? How do you do on call? Do you have service level objectives? How do you ship? So we had a line in the sand in terms of, hey, this is what you should probably be doing before you launch and take customers' money. So we established that we got executive buy-in and rolled it out. So it was a huge paradigm shift in terms of how we launched new services because we had a whole bunch of products in Acquia's heyday. So we needed to be able to manage how they were built and prepared for production.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so the reason this the ignition for this was a great leader that we have called John Mandel.
Yeah.
That the first thing he did when he came in, I remember quite well, he asked, "Where are my DevOps people?"
Right.
Right? And I knew at that moment this is transformational leadership coming in. I knew this is, uh, if you read my thesis, transformational leadership and collaboration,
Hmm.
culture of collaboration are like top main capabilities to implement, to adopt DevOps in organizations, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
And John did, this was just after you left.
Right.
um, John came and said, "Oh, so you're the principal here. You're now a manager."
Just here you go.
Here you go. And suddenly I had your torch
Right.
to carry on. And when I think we had this conversation in Amsterdam where I
We
said
definitely, yeah.
where I said things will get a little bit worse before they get better.
You're right. And I think that situation was the right inflection point to go into the platform engineering model. Because if we look at the DevOps journey, across the years that we were working together, and then after I departed, like in the beginning, it was like, okay, you have the software engineers and you have the ops team. Okay, that's a problem. They're
Hmm.
separate, and they weren't on call either. So we started with, okay, let's get engineers on call and make sure that they're at least part of an escalation, procedure. We started there. We then moved to SRE, where we started to embed ops folks in on the engineering teams across the groups, to instill operational maturity. Now, and that was right around the time that I left. Like that was the model. But in retrospect, here was the issue, and it wasn't really a problem. It was just we ran that through its course. We now had a bunch of engineering teams that were operating their stuff a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And all of them were on call for systems that were somewhat different. The processes were different. Their values were different. Their internal cultures were different. Their languages were different. And so, you know, there's a lot of toil, collective toil that the teams were all doing. They were owning their stuff, finally, which was lovely. But we needed to give them something that reduced a lot of that toil significantly. So when you came in, and with John Mandel's mandate, and you became manager, and you had the means and the direction, you then consolidated. This is how you run production, and made it a thing for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, there are other people which are really valuable in this change. Like
Of course,
architecture, especially the all of the architecture team, because
right?
they really drove this sense of direction, clear direction
Hmm.
and I think some companies just need that, like they need the direction. They need to believe that is the right path for them, right? Because right now we have incredible things. Like the thing that I wrote in that chapter in the O'Reilly book, right?
Hmm.
Talking about machine learning for, that adapts and forecasts what's going to happen and just molds the capacity of a system. It's happening, right? We have it. We
Yeah.
have that in our systems, right?
Wow.
We have Kubernetes um, automatically um changing the resources of workloads when the workloads themselves, they are getting more um, more requests for more CPU or requests for more
Yeah,
memory and
sure.
so on, right? So these capabilities are now in place just because there was this transformational leadership that came in, and then there was this architectural vision that we create together,
Mhm.
right? And finally, we are in this position where I think we can drive this with much less burden for any operations person.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are no perfect systems, but I think what we did and accomplished, specifically with the team that I manage, it's called the Platform Automation Team.
Mhm.
Funny name, right? I think you remember it. Another automation team in your time, right?
Team automation. Yeah. Maybe some
Yes, yeah,
listeners will recognize that name because hopefully there's some listeners that were former Acquians that were part of that group. Yes.
right, right. So I also grabbed that torch and
Hmm.
said, no, we need to revive that because that's the right thing to do. All of these people, they were trying to do that in the past. They were right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when I say we need to to do the right thing, it doesn't mean that anyone in Acquia is wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
No.
systems are difficult, like in the market that we have right now, right, where things are changing constantly, right?
Hmm.
um, where we have CVEs, like vulnerabilities that appear in any moment, right? We have to react fast, right?
Yes,
And
we
and
do.
so creating a system that um, automatically reacts to this, that reduces the toil of human beings having to go and fixing something or creating a ticket or back and forth, just wasting their time when they could be doing something really really interesting,
Yeah.
is an accomplishment, is something that any company should be striving to. Yeah, definitely.
100%. I mean, so why do we as DevOps SRE practitioners, why are we focusing so much on the engineering experience around on-call, around toil, around work-life balance? There's a reason for it, and of course you know this, but
Hmm,
for the
hmm,
for the for the listeners' benefit, it all comes down to operational expense.
hmm.
It is
Yeah.
expensive to have, engineers that are being paid top dollar to do work, to
Hmm,
waste their time on manual tasks. It is expensive to recruit, hire, and train new engineers when the old ones get really frustrated with the status quo and then just leave and vote with their feet. So, one of the reasons why Ricardo and I were attacking the problem from the perspective of, making sure that engineers, we were doing right by engineers and improving their lives, is that it enabled them to do their best work and it enabled them to do the work that they're actually paid to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I think right now um, we are focusing on new things that really, like we have this amazing service catalog, as I was saying,
Right. It's
that
cool.
now serves as an automated maturity assessment tool, right? You have other tools like that, like Backstage, right, which is an
Right.
open source service catalog. Anyone in the audience here can go in and see it. What we did there was making sure that everyone has the opportunity to own that with the least effort,
Right.
right? Because if you think about it, like one of the things that you own a system and you need to make it compliant, right? You need to make
Right.
it like ISO compliant, or like all of the bolts that customers require in terms of security. Um, you need to have a place where you go and say, okay, we've done this, we've done that, right? and it's really visible. It's like a single pane of glass so that everyone, including leadership, can see how good or how bad any of the systems are, and then just focus energies to solve this or improve that, right?
Hmm.
And that is one of the key things that I think DevOps adoption needs, is to have really good visibility tools, right?
Hmm.
Visibility, when you have feedback loops, right? DevOps,
You
feedback loops
must.
is fine.
Second way.
Exactly. But if you don't make that visible, that is always a problem, because those feedback loops might end up, with 5, 2, 3 people, and they go like, yeah, we know this exists, but it's nobody else is paying attention. And so having a thing like Backstage or a service catalog or a maturity tool, developer portal, I think that some people call it developer portal.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Platform
yeah,
engineering
yeah.
esque tool. Hmm.
And so if you focus your energy on seeing that, it even helps to overcome the resistance to change some things. Even product will be more aware of the things that need to be improved. Right.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's a constant, not a battle, but it is I think it's a constant educational opportunity to show
It is.
product. Hey,
Yep.
there's certain non-functional requirements that really matter. There's some things that we'll grumble about and we can hold off on, but there are certain things that really matter that we need to focus on. And being able to expose that information on a dashboard is a way more powerful means to sell it than to talk passionately based on pure sentiment with them personally. Like if you have an operational standard and you rolled it across the org and you're like, "Hey, your production system is orange and red on these aspects." Well, let's go make them green. Like it's much easier a discussion because it's already codified. That's huge. And by the way, during my time at Meta, they had service catalog, they had all these things. It's really cool to see, a company that's not the gigantic organizations doing the same types of practices,
Hmm.
and adopting, that the high level maturity. So I think that's encouragement for the audience that, for medium to large size organizations where you have lots of engineering teams, there are tools and there are techniques and there are paths to driving high levels of operational maturity across the organization, without just one-to-one campaigning. There are tools that help you do it.
Yep. And I would like to state a little bit of my work that I've
Hmm.
done recently that's going to be published in the thesis,
Please
which
do.
is, like I found, with the help of many people, including you, 37 capabilities. I think it was 24 DevOps metrics, and even like mapped these capabilities to one thing that's called the DevOps standard. If people are not aware that exists, that is a thing. The IEEE published in 2021 DevOps standard. You
Mm.
can get it online on IEEE. But yeah, just some notes on how you should be driving your adoption.
Hmm.
Always try to start by having a standard CI/CD pipeline that every service is going to use a single standard CI/CD pipeline, right? A
Hmm.
thing that you can control, and if you change the tool, imagine a security scanning tool, that
Right.
CI/CD pipeline automatically starts doing that for everyone. I'm not talking about, things like GitHub CI or GitLab CI. I'm talking about something that will do the changes that need to be done when they need to be done for the internal teams, right? And that's a standard CI/CD pipeline. That is not, you go and use GitLab and you configure your things there. That is not a standard
You're
CI/CD
talking about
pipeline.
like a pipeline of pipelines, something
A
that is
pipeline
managed.
of pipelines, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And you
Mhm.
need to own how that works, uh, from the ground, from zero,
Right. Yeah.
right? And then the other thing is having that internal catalog for doing the maturity assessment, for knowing, ownership of services is really important.
Mhm.
And as I said, the third factor, the third strategy, as I said, Kubernetes was really important to us. It doesn't mean it's going to be important for everyone, but we
Right.
found that having a common, in this case, cloud native platform is really a game changer,
Yeah.
right? Another thing it's really important is that monitoring and observability practices needs to be centralized. Like you need to have a team that is worrying about that, not having the alerts, but just saying, okay, this is the standard way we should be monitoring things. This is the standard way we should be doing observability, right? The other thing is always measure automated test code coverage, right? Because if you don't measure that, then you don't know how the unit tests for every team are, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Finally, do tool chain automation and integration. You have to have tools that talk with each other, that integrate with each other. If they are separate and they can't, know of each other's existence, they don't serve a purpose, right? It's like the collaboration between dev and ops, right?
Mm.
And that also goes in the way of security and compliance. You have to have tools, but those tools need to be integrated, right? You can't have them, standing alone just there. I remember we had Rapid7, remember in the past, right? It was
Yes.
just standing there.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
not
That's right.
integrated,
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't
Right now,
informing decisions
yeah,
or build or release. It wasn't part of it.
yeah. And then finally, strong leadership support. This is the crucial factor for driving DevOps transformation in organizations.
Huge, huge. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is some real sage advice, especially in larger organizations when you really need to get everyone moving in the same direction. Thank you, Dr. DevOps. I think the name's just gonna stick. I am so sorry, but so it looks like this is a great time to wrap up. We've covered an immense amount of ground. We've reminisced. We talked about our times together with the DevOps transformation, what you've done, yourself long after I was gone, the things that you owned and the things that you've accomplished, which is quite a bit. So yeah, how can we reach you?
One of the ways you can reach me is on LinkedIn. My profile is Ricardo Amaro in LinkedIn, so it's easy to find. And obviously, also have a page on Drupal.org. There's a contact form there. At least these two ways, you'll be able to communicate with me.
Fantastic. Well, Ricardo, thank you so much for joining me on episode 2 of Reliability Rebels. This has been fantastic. I should have you on again.
Yeah, and I wish you all the success for this. I think this is an amazing endeavor that you're taking on by doing this podcast because it will help many, many organizations and people. I'm pretty sure of it.
Thank you for listening to today's edition of Reliability Rebels. Until next time.
Reliability Rebels. Reliability Rebels. Reliability Rebels.